Hello, everybody. My name is Braden Wynn, as you probably already know, and this is a presentation about my app. So, the objective of this PBL was during the last quarter of this year, we were given the task of creating an application of our own design, and Mr. Vote Highly suggested that we use Android Studio, and that was kind of the main thing of this PBL. But due to complications with it, and as well as the Citrix receiver, I chose to create my app in App Inventor. And Mr. Vote said if we were to do that, we would have to comment every piece of code and kind of give a better explanation of what it does compared to real Java code. The first thing we did this PBL was research on how to create our application that we chose. So we searched up tutorials and other informational sites and things to give us a better idea of how to do what we plan to accomplish. So the second thing that we did was to create a proposal written as if we were giving it to a board or something of that sort, to kind of propose for us to create this application and to give us a better idea of being more professional and something we might have to do in the real world. And later we would add appendixes to this proposal. So up next are the appendixes. So the first appendix that we added to our proposal was a storyboard for our application. I created mine in Google Docs with different cool backgrounds and text fonts to kind of get the general idea of what I wanted my app to look like, and I was kind of going for the book feel, the book look, to give it to kind of give off a medievally kind of feel towards the players of the game. And the second appendix we did was to create a flowchart, which showed in detail how our app would work and flow. So if, say, for example, on the start page, if you press the start button, then it goes up there to the start button part of the code, and then it would play out that, and it just goes on for the rest of the flowchart and kind of telling you how it works. The third appendix was we created pseudocode, which is basically a broader version of normal code. It's not as complicated and is a more detailed version of a flowchart. It is the base for when excuse me, it is the base for when you start to create your real code. I created two versions. On the bottom left, there is my first version, and on the top and in the middle on the right, there is a more detailed version that I created later. Then next up, the fourth appendix was a prototype that we made in proto.io. Mine was completely functional, and it showed a good example of how I planned my application to look, and as well how it would function. The fifth appendix was two charts. The one on the top is a Gantt chart, which gave detail about what we were going to do and when we were going to do it, though we did edit it according to what actually happened and if it didn't go according to plan. The second chart was a milestone chart, which was basically just a more basic, less detailed version of the Gantt chart, and I did mine, I think, by weeks at a time instead of doing it like my Gantt chart. And next up is the development stage of our applications. So the development stage finally begins. After finishing our appendixes, we finally began development on our physical application. The development stage was divided into 4 sections: version 1, 2, 3, and the final version. So version 1, my version 1/beta version was built in BlueJ just as a basic example of what I planned on making my version 2 based off of. So instead of having a bunch of buttons and complicated code, I just created a simple thing in BlueJ to give you the gist of what my app would be like. So this is a example of version 1 code. Here you can see that I imported a scanner, which is basically so you can type into the to the window part when you are actually playing the game. And so I defined it. I turned it into a variable to use throughout the rest of the code. And here's the start. And a bunch of if statements. So if you type in this, this happens, and it keeps on going. So instead of having buttons, you type in the answer according to what the options are given to you. And my version 2 was built in App Inventor, as I said earlier, due to complications in Android Studio and other things, I decided to use that. So I made a working home screen and button on my version 2, as well as one or two pieces to the actual game and story. I was able to have it pushed to one of the tablets that we have access to in our class. And here's an example of code in App Inventor. It is all commented. So, like here, makes when when this happens, it makes right paragraph visible or invisible according to whatever this over here tells this. So yeah, that's that. And I'll talk about code later. I'll talk about code in more detail later. And version 3, my third version, had many more pages, as you can see over here, than I had in version 2. And they are pretty much very similar to that in version 2, just with different parts of the story and different paths that you can take. Here's a code example from version 3. It's as you can see, it's more code than in version 2. It's about the same. I used only about 4 or 5 of the same kinds of code throughout the whole game. So my final version has many more pages. It filled up this whole list, and it actually made my game lag when you try and play it, and it took about 5 minutes just to load up the App Inventor site so you could work on it. But there is an end, and all of it is functional. I went through it and fixed up any mistakes if I left out one block of code or mistyped something. So that's my final version. And here's a code example from my final version. As you can see, there's a lot more, but it's still those basic 4 or 5 pieces of code. So understanding the code, as I said, I would talk about the code more. So when blocks of code are basically the same thing as if statements in BlueJ, and these two things here are like command statements, which are ruled by whatever you plug into the site over here. So this is like a variable, and this is basically defines itself. It's just a true block, which you can plug into here to make whatever this says. It makes it visible. And that's that. Thank you for watching. Yeah. Get out of there.